Proverbs chapter 6, verses 1 through 11 says, My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself. When thou art come into the hand of thy friend, go, humble thyself, and make sure thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thy eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, as a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. I like how he just throws that in there, just like calls him a name, just throws that in there. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long will you sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. So what do we know right off the bat, just upon a cursory observation? What do we know about this chapter? First of all, there's no introduction, kind of like my sermon. There's no introduction. He just dives right in to the lesson. Normally, he kind of goes on and on about how, son, please listen to my words. Remember, we've made a big deal about that. Every time he starts a new section, it's like, Lord, he's like, son, please listen to my words, hold on to my words, hide my words into your heart. They're going to be, grace to your neck. There'll be grace to your head. There'll be long life, years to your life. He goes on and on with this long introduction and encouragement. And then after that, he gets into his lesson. In this chapter, nothing, not a single word. And you can see, not only does he do that in every chapter, but does it in every section of every chapter. There's an introduction. And he has one in here later when he starts a new section to pick up his pattern. But here, nothing, no introduction whatsoever. And what that means for us is that this chapter is actually a continuation of chapter 5. It's not a totally new lesson. It is a continuation from the lesson in chapter 5. And we know in the last lesson that he warns his son, right, about adultery, which leads to poverty, which she will take everything from you. He says, if you fall for the con of adultery. He says she's going to take all your money, that you're going to have to work for cruel men, and you will have to, what? You're going to have to give everything that you have, all of your wealth, to who? To strangers, he says in chapter 5. Now, when you look back up here in verse number 1, who is he striking hands with? In verse number 1, do you see that? If you become surety for a friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, right? Now, do you guys know what surety is, real quick? Just as a side note, I'm assuming that you do. Surety is like a cosigner, right? If you're going to become security for a loan, so like your friend needs a loan, and they say, can you be security for me for that loan? So you're the one that's going to shake hands with the one that they're, in this case, that they're loaning money from, saying, okay, I'm the one making the deal for you or with you. So that if they can't pay, you have to come get it from me, right? That's what they're saying. So you're becoming surety for your friend, but you're the one that's making the deal. Does that make sense? And so he begins the chapter. He just kind of jumps into real life right here at the beginning of the chapter, and he starts with his son in, to use a word that Paul uses sometimes, in a pickle, right? I like that word. It's a good British word. It doesn't sound right when I say it, but it sounds more posh whenever he says it. But he finds his son right here in a mess. That's what I would say. And now the son has agreed, obviously, in this situation, to be security for the funds of a friend. And you notice he says friend like 3 different times in the first couple of verses. You're going to be surety for your friend, and if you need to deliver yourself, and when you're coming to the hand of your friend, go and humble thyself and make sure thy friend. He mentions it 3 different times, this quote unquote friend. And he tells his son, you need to go deliver yourself from the hand of the hunter, he says. Right? which he identifies later in verse 26. The one who's doing the hunting is who in verse 26? Yeah, the adulteress, the harlot, is who's identified as the hunter later. And here at the very beginning, he says, I want you to deliver yourself from the hunter, which he identifies as the adulteress in verse 26. And finally, the one that the son has agreed to be security for is called, okay, just to point this out again, is called a friend, which is not really a special word. It's the normal Hebrew word for a friend, right? It could even be called someone, a neighbor. It could even refer to someone who just happens to be next to you. It could be just another person. It's a pretty average word. And it all seems quite normal, but then we remember our context, what he's been talking about since the beginning of chapter 5 is adultery. Now just consider, okay? Put yourself in the son's situation. And you have a mistress or a mister. I don't know how you would say that, If you have a mistress and you're going to introduce her to somebody, how might you designate her socially? I'd like to introduce you to Irene. This is, what would you call her? This is my friend, Irene. Can't call her your girlfriend because it's a secret. Can't call her a coworker. She's not. Well, maybe she's not. But typically you would say if you were introducing her, if you run upon someone, to your horror in the streets, they see you with her. Oh, this is Irene. This is my friend, right? And I believe, okay, playing the detective a little bit, I think that's who this friend is Irene. I call her Irene for a good reason, but we won't go into that. And what about, okay, in Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 1? Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 1 that also uses this very normal word that says, they say if a man put away his wife, also, again, the context in Jeremiah 3:1 is adultery. If a man put away his wife and she go from him and she become another man's, shall he return unto her again? Shall not that land be polluted? He says, but thou hast played the harlot with many friends. Do you see that word? It's the same Hebrew word. You played the harlot with many lovers. Jeremiah used the same word that Solomon uses as friend. That's what Jeremiah is saying. You guys have played the harlot with many friends, as they would typically designate them socially. I suspect that the friend here at the beginning of chapter 5, or beginning of chapter 6, is his mistress. Whenever he talks about in chapter 5, he says, this woman's going to take you for everything she's got. How do you suppose she's going to do that exactly? How do you suppose he's going to lose all of his money? She has sex with him, of course, but then afterwards, she approaches him with this wonderful idea that she's working on, of course, and she just has a problem because she can't seem to get a loan. She doesn't have a good credit score. I'm not sure if the Hebrew ladies ran into that problem, but she can't seem to get a loan, and she really needs someone to secure this loan for her. It's such a common cliche that sex makes men stupid, makes men foolish. But it gets worse. If that wasn't bad enough, it actually gets worse. You see, what we're starting to see unfold at the beginning of the chapter is that it's all a lie. It's part of the con, if you will. Irene, right, our mistress here, and the stranger that he's striking hands with, I believe that they're working on this together. I believe they're both in on it. They're both in on it together, and they're going to take this Mark, the son, for all he's got. And you say, well, I don't really see that, right? I don't really see that when I look at it. Because, in the words of Sir Doyle, you see, but you do not observe, right? So consider this. If you look at verses 12 through 15, look at 12 through 15. What's he start talking about to his son next? He says, you need to not just be aware of the situation, you need to be aware of this naughty person. I love that word, naughty. It sounds like something that a woman might say, or something you might say about a 3-year-old, Oh, he's being really naughty, And that's not what this means. He follows it up with a wicked man. He walketh with a froward mouth. But look how he describes him. He winketh with his eyes. He speaketh with his feet. He teacheth with his fingers. Frowardness is in his heart. He deviseth mischief continually. So with discord. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. So let's take a quick look at this wicked man. Because we're going to come back to the first couple of verses, but I want us to take a look at the situation we're in. Look at this wicked man, how he describes him. It says that he's a naughty person, which this Hebrew phrase means he's like a son of Belial. In other words, he is a devilish man, right? You're never going to call your son naughty again, are you? Because this naughty person, it says he is a son of Belial. He's a devilish man. He's a troublemaker. He has a froward mouth, which means he's a crook. He speaks perverse things. He has a crooked mouth, deceptive mouth. But now check this out. Do you see these things that he says about this naughty guy? He says that he winks with his eyes, he speaks with his feet and his fingers. Do you know what this is talking about? But when it says that he winks with his eyes, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with winking? Winking is usually in our context something that's kind of nice. But it adds to it that he speaks with his fingers. And he also teaches with his feet. Now, what is that talking about? Now, what this is describing here are the actions of a con man. That's what he's describing. When you think about it in that context, it makes so much more sense. Now, he winks with his eyes, he speaks with his feet and fingers. It refers to the signals and the instructions that a con man gives to the other cohorts that are in on it with him. These are the signals. So in this scenario, who do you think this naughty man is winking at? Who's he winking at? Irene. He says to the son, he says, listen, you can trust me. And when the son turns around to Irene, he gives Irene a little wink. We've got him, right? Gives her a little wink over the son's shoulder. They plan ahead that if he needs her to kind of step up, and to convince the son, they've already got this all arranged. What do? He runs his fingers through his hair as a signal, right? If I do that, that means you need to step in, Irene, and you need to work him over a little bit and convince him. Or maybe he shuffles with his feet, which is what this Hebrew word actually means, to shuffle with your feet. Maybe he shuffles with your feet, and that's a signal to them that now's the moment for the next phase of the plan. That's what it's talking about. He warns the son, the father does, he warns the son about the poverty that is going to come. He says it will come. How's it going to come? When he tells them that poverty is going to come, in verse, I think it's 11, he says your poverty is going to come how? As an armed man. It's going to come as a robber, isn't he? Someone's going to rob you and take your money. He says it's going to come as one that traveleth. The word traveleth is talking about what's called a highwayman. Someone travels up and down the highways robbing people, conning people. So this naughty man that he's talking about is someone who is a con man. And the Lord hates this kind of person. As you can see in the next couple of verses. He says these 6 things that the Lord hates, yea, 7 is an abomination. He said a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaks lies, and he that sows discord among the brethren. These things describe both the wicked man and the strange woman and all the mischief that they get up to. A proud look, that's the look that a confidence man has. He always has to have complete confidence in the situation. He's full of pride. The lying tongue that he uses to deceive, the hands that shed innocent blood, because his whole goal is to take what doesn't belong to him. It's exactly what he talked about, those sinners that he told him to stay away from in chapter 1, because they're always going to be there to shed innocent blood. It's a heart that devises wicked imaginations. This means he always has a plan and a scheme that he is working. His feet, they run to mischief. You know why? Because he loves it. He lives for it. A false witness. This is a perjurer, someone who refuses to admit his own guilt. If there's one rule that you need to remember when you are involved in a con, okay? There's one rule that every good con artist knows. You don't ever drop the con. You don't ever drop the con. Even when they've got you dead to rights, when they've got all the evidence lined up, you don't ever get in and drop the con. You always maintain your role in the con. He's a liar to the end. Even if he is on the stand, he will perjure himself. He is a liar completely. And he sows discord. That's what they do. That's what they leave in their wake, is they leave broken lives, broken relationships. What they leave in their wake is conflict, right? This is the purpose of what he does. It's also the culmination, and it's the result of all that precedes it. He creates conflict, he takes what he wants, and in the end, he leaves division, he leaves divorce, he leaves distrust, and as it sums it all up here in this one word, discord. That's what he leaves. It's just as I told you last week. This is what we talked about last week, and this is a continuation of this. I told you last week that adultery or unfaithfulness is a con. This person, the son, he's being very naive and gullible. This kind of person cannot see the long-term consequences. So they find themselves in shaky circumstances. Shaky circumstances and shady circumstances. Naive people always find themselves in this kind of situation. So Solomon informs his son both how to extricate himself from the situation, but he also teaches him in this passage how to avoid it altogether. Do you have any idea how you can both extricate yourself from such a situation where you've now made yourself security for a loan to your friend with this con man? I mean, you're in deep now, right? How do you get out? And even better, how do you avoid having to deal with this kind of situation at all? He tells them. And the answer to this, okay, and this is really where the wisdom of this chapter comes into play. The answer to this is one word. The answer to both of these is the word work. That's how you extricate yourself from a situation like this. It's also how you avoid a situation like this altogether. This is tantamount to a cuss word. It's a word that we hate. It's a word we don't like. But Solomon teaches us the wisdom of work in this chapter. And he says this is how you get yourself out of a situation. Now, maybe you've never been in a situation quite like this, but maybe you have been in a financial bind, or maybe you've just been in a bad situation otherwise. There's one way that you can get yourself out of it, and there's one way that you can avoid it. It's with this word that it's like profanity to us. We don't like to hear it. It's one of these things that we try to do everything in our power to avoid. Okay, so go back, if you would, to verses 1 to 11. And we're going to take a look. And I want you to see the wisdom. You'll see the wisdom so clear in these 11 verses if you take with that context in mind. And he says, son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if you've stricken hands with a stranger, thou art snared. You've been caught. Do you see what he's saying to him? You've been snared like an animal in a trap. You have fallen into their trap. You've been snared with the words of thy mouth. You've been taken with the words. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this. So this is what you do, my son. Deliver thyself when thou art come into the hands of thy friend. So he even refers to the friend. You've come into the hands of your friend, and you need to be delivered from her. Go humble thyself and make sure of thy friend. He says, give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Right? Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, as a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. He says, how long are you going to sleep, O sluggard? When will you arise out of your sleep? Just a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, and so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. So you kind of start to see the wisdom there in the context. I want you to take a look at it, at this wisdom. First of all, here's the way that you deliver yourself. This is just a short part, but I want you to see it. This is the way you deliver yourself. He says, you do not sleep until you have delivered yourself from this situation. But you'd have to stay up late. You'd have to work the night shift, in other words. You got to work the day shift. You take a double shift. You work hard, and you do not give sleep to your eyes until you have paid off this debt. You must work night and day if you have to, and then you free yourself of that debt. That's the way you deliver yourself. You work hard until you raise the money and you pay it and get yourself extricated from this, get out of it. But also the way that you avoid it is he says, do not be lazy, be a hard worker. And he says, consider the ant. He says, be like the ant, son, be wise, that they are able to work when no one is overseeing them. And they are able to work, their work ensures that they will always have enough later. Do you see how the ant works? Even though nobody's overseeing them, they work hard to make sure that they have enough later. Now, I want you to notice, in particular, the words that he uses. He says, there's 3 different phrases that I want you to see. He says, first of all, he says to his son, do this now, right? So he's telling him, this is what you're supposed to do. Do this now. He says 2 different times here, he says, deliver thyself. Do you see that? And he also adds to it, humble thyself. Now, why are those words important? I draw your attention to those words because this is something that you must do yourself. This is something that God will not do for you. He will not do this for you. We all believe, all of us, we all believe in the power of prayer, don't we? Right? Raise your hand. You're like, what am I raising my hand for? No, just pretend you do. We all believe in the power of prayer. We all do, and we all believe that the power of prayer can bring down miracles from heaven, that prayer can literally move God's hands. But listen to me very carefully, okay, about that. Prayer is not a way out of work. That's not what prayer is. Prayer is not an abdication of your responsibility. That's not what prayer is meant to be. We use it that way sometimes, right? You know, we had 3 months to study for the test. We did nothing. And the night before, we're like, oh, God, please give me a good grade, right? What are we doing? He's like, hey, man, look. The work part was your responsibility, right? But now, having said that, you know what? God does come down and he does rescue us, doesn't he? Even when we're stupid. Isn't that great? There was one time, Caitlin, she came into her class and they announced they were having a quiz, right? And she didn't even know I guess she had been absent a day or something, but she didn't even know that the quiz was going to happen. And so she had found out about it before she got to class, and she was praying. She was like, God, please get me out of this. And so she got to the class, they sat down, and the teacher comes in and she says, hey, listen, something just came up. We're going to have to cancel the quiz, and we're going to have to shut it all down, and we're going to have to reschedule it for another day. And she was like, oh, thank you, Lord, for answering my prayer. She was like, can you believe that? He said he rescheduled everything at school for me. Isn't that awesome? God does do that. God does reach down at times and pull us out of trouble. There's no question about it. But most of the time, the way he rescues us is by providing the work that must be done to get us out of it. If you're broke, guess what he's going to give you? A job. He's going to give you a job. If your marriage is in trouble, well, he's going to show you how to work on it, isn't he? If you struggle with sin, he's going to provide opportunities for you to exercise godliness. If you struggle with temptation, he will always provide a way for you to escape. But you have to take the way of escape, don't you? The answer to our prayers and our problems is almost always hard work. The point here is that hard work is something that you cannot avoid. Hard work is something that you must do, and you must do it yourself. Listen to me now very carefully, okay? I want you to hear me. You can't avoid it. It's unavoidable. No matter what happens, God will always be there, and he will help you in your time of need. But there will always be an aspect of the situation and of the answer. There will always be an aspect of it that is your responsibility, and it will fall to you to have to do the work. Even when he rescues you, there will always be, even though he rescued Caitlin, guess what she had to go home and do then? She had to go home and study. He gave her a stay of execution, but she still had to go home and do the work. There will always, within the answer that God brings, there will always be an aspect of it that will be your responsibility, and it will be your job to do the work. We learn a very important lesson about work and laziness and responsibilities in this chapter. So just let us consider the ant for a moment, okay? A couple of things that he says about the ant. One, it says that when they work, they don't have anybody watching over them. They have no overseer. Another thing it says is that whenever they work, there's no one there to tell them to do it. They have no ruler over them. And yet they still work really hard, so much so that they have a harvest. Right? Do you see that? Let me ask you something. Are you able to do that? Are you able to work hard even though there's nobody watching? Are you able to work hard when there's no one there to tell you to do it? Whenever young people leave the house and they go off by themselves for the first time, that's when they find out if they're able to do that. Because now all of a sudden, mom's not there to say, don't forget you got that test tomorrow. You know, you're on your third episode of The Office and you have a test tomorrow. I'm sure you've studied, right? Mom's not there to say that anymore. It's up to you when you have no overseer and no ruler to be able to work hard so that you can provide for yourself later. But he asks some hard questions. He says, how long are you going to sleep? How long are you going to take to get up out of your slumber? How long are you going to take to get up and actually do the work? It's a good question. How long are you going to sit around before you start working? How long is it going to be? He says just a little bit of folding of the hands to sleep, a little slumber, just going to sit down, I'm going to take a little 15-year nap. And then all of a sudden we wake up and we're like, oh, everybody please save me because I've been asleep for the last 10 years, and now I've got all these problems. How long is it going to be that we're going to stay asleep in our lives? There's going to have to come some point in your life when you're going to have to make a decision that you're going to do the work that is necessary in your life, whatever it might be. At some point, you just have to suck it up. You just have to say, you know what? I have responsibilities, and I'm going to see to them. But then he gives us a warning. He says, if you do not get up and work, he says, your poverty will come like a man, like a traveling man, a highwayman, and your want will come like an armed man. In other words, it's going to come and it's going to rob you. This is one of the things that, listen to me, this is one of the most important things that it teaches us in this, that I've never really heard this anywhere the way that Solomon puts it. When he says, if you sleep, if you fold your hands and you lie back and you don't do anything, he says your poverty will come like a man that traveleth, like will come as an your want will come as an armed man. This is what he's saying to you. He's saying your responsibilities are coming for you. That's what he's saying. Your responsibilities are coming for you, and when they come, they're going to rob you of everything you've got. That's what he's saying. And you don't know, like a highwayman or an armed man that robs your house, you don't know when they're going to show up. And they always show up when you don't expect them. But make no mistake, right now, as we are sitting here, they are coming for you, your responsibilities. The ant, what she did, the ant dealt with his responsibilities, and as a result, he increased. The sluggard, on the other hand, he denied his responsibilities, and as a result, he lost what he had. Do you see that? It's not complicated, as Mindy would tell me all the time. It's not rocket science, Brian. She said the ant dealt with his responsibilities, and as a result, he increased. The sluggard denied his responsibilities, and as a result, he lost what he had. Solomon, not only did he consider the ant, but he also took a little drive in Proverbs over to the slothful man's house. Did you know that? Over in Proverbs chapter 24, verses 30 to 34, he just drives by the slothful man's house because he wants to take a look. He's already considered the hard-working ant. So he's like, let's take a look at the other side, right? Let's go over to his part of the neighborhood and let's take a look at him. Proverbs 24, 30 to 34, he says, I went by the field. So you thought I was joking. He really did. He went by the field to take a look. He went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, no surprise here, it was all grown over with thorns and nettles, and had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and I considered it. What did he say to do to the ant? Consider the ant. And that's what he did here. He considered it. He's like, I need to learn from this. I considered it well. I looked upon it, and I received instruction. And he says the exact same thing that he said in chapter 6. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, and so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. Draws the exact same conclusion, both from the one who did it and also from what not to do in the life of the slothful man. I want you to think of it this way. You can rise up and you can rob your responsibilities, or they can rob you. One or the other is going to happen. You can either take responsibility or your responsibilities will take you. It is your choice, but make no mistake that your responsibilities are coming for you, and when they show up, they will be armed. They will be armed. You see, that is the way that hard work works. This is how you deal with responsibilities. You ever wondered about, like, man, I wish that I had more self-discipline? Anybody ever wondered that? Wish I had more self-discipline. The problem really with self-discipline is we're not looking at it in a biblical way. What Solomon just gave us here is absolute gold when you think about what it is that really motivates you and moves you. You know, we're just hoping to God that we're going to run across an inspirational quote on Instagram that's going to finally make me work out every day. Solomon gives us the secret. He gives us the secret. Now, just as a side note, when I said that there was a continuation in this lesson, and that there was like an abruptness about it. Remember, there was no introduction. It was just like a continuation in this. Not only is there a continuation in this lesson and an abruptness, but there is also a progression in this lesson. If you notice, in the first part of the chapter, he's talking about this son who is naive. In the second part of the first part, he's talking about someone who is lazy. And then right after that, he's talking about a man who was wicked. Now what he is laying out for you is a progression. You have a naive son who falls into this situation. Oh, doop-de-doop-de-doo, I don't know. I just think this girl is really nice, and this seems like a nice man, you know, and he falls into this situation because he's naive, he's gullible. But then you have this sluggard, this lazy man that he talks about next, and then you have a wicked man that he talks about. That is a progression that he gives you on purpose. The naive to the lazy to the wicked is a progression. Let me ask you something. How do you suppose the wicked man began? There was a time when that wicked man was a mark himself. This guy didn't just jump up one day being some wicked con man. If you've ever talked to someone who was a con man, you know that's not how they start. They usually start out because they're a mark themselves. See, listen to me. If you have a foolish person who is lazy, it is only a matter of time before they are wicked. If you have a foolish person who is lazy, it's only a matter of time before they are wicked. And why do you say that? Because they're naive enough and gullible enough to fall into a situation, but they're too lazy to work themselves out of it. So what are they going to do? They're going to have to find some sort of shortcut in order to get themselves out of it. They will have to do something shady. See, this is the way hard work works. In Proverbs 14:23, it says, "In all labor there is profit, but the talk of lips tendeth only to penury. In all labor there is profit, but the talk of lips tendeth only to penury." You see, this is what we always do. We always talk about doing the work. We always talk about doing it. I'm going to do it. I promise I'm going to do it. I promise I'm going to find a job next week. I promise I'm going to work out next week. I promise I'm going to mow the lawn next week. I promise. I've got a plan. Would you like to sit down and hear my plan about how it is that I'm going to turn my life around? I've got a plan. I've written it down. I would love to share it with you. You know, that kind of stuff, you know what that will do? That will make you broke. That's what that does. That's what that does. It only tends to penury. It tends to pennies. There's no profit in talking about something. There is only profit in work. It doesn't matter. Even if you're doing something in a bad way. I remember when I first started the church, and I would go out, I would be knocking on doors, you know, and I was trying to come up with every idea that I could in order to get the gospel out. And I even went out one time, because I told Mindy, I said, I have to be doing something, right? It was just me and her at our house. I got a coffee pot, and I stood it. There was a bus stop right by our house, and I stood it right by the bus stop, and I had a sign that said free coffee. So hopefully when people come up to get on the bus, maybe they would talk to me. And the people were walking around me to go into the newsagents so they could buy coffee, just so they could avoid me, okay? And I'm sitting there with 2 full pots of coffee and these cups and everything I bought. I look over at my house. I kid you not, my wife is in the window and she's like, she's just embarrassed. Look at you. What are you doing? And she's like, what are you doing, man? And I said, hey, listen, I said, a bad idea is better than no idea, right? I need to be working. And eventually God, through all of the trial and error, he led me out into the high street, and we saw some people get saved, and it changed our lives forever. That's a whole different message. Okay, but you have to make a choice that there's always profit in labor, but there is no profit in sitting on our backsides. There's no profit in just talking about all the stuff that you want to do. You have to be able to say to yourself, listen, when I wake up in the morning, I want you to remember this. This will affect, I promise you, every area of your life. This is the way that I want you to think. I want you to realize the truth that there is no way that you can avoid this situation. It is unavoidable. We spend most of our time trying to avoid this, and you cannot escape it. Your responsibilities, they know where you live. You cannot avoid them. Not forever. There's no way out. You have to be able to say to yourself, I am going to rob my responsibilities today. I'm going to take them for everything they've got before they rob me. That's the way that you need to be thinking. That's the biblical way to think about responsibilities. I promise you, if you take on that biblical mindset toward responsibilities, self-discipline will take care of itself. Just remember, when you wake up in the morning, they're coming. They're on their way, and you can't escape them. So, if you have a foolish person, as I was saying before, if you have a foolish person who is lazy, it's only a matter of time before they are wicked, because they will always get themselves into this kind of shady situation. If you are foolish, okay, I'll be the first one to raise my hand and claim that title. I am foolish all the time. I'm the only one, okay? You guys are just going to leave me hanging out there? I'm the only one that's I am foolish all the time. But listen, if you are foolish, you better be a hard worker. You better be a hard worker. If you are lazy, then you better be clever. Better be one of the two. Because if you are foolish and lazy, you are 2/3 the way to wicked. I promise you. I promise you. So now, okay, now that we understand the biblical mindset of hard work, all of a sudden Solomon it looks like he shifts gears, but he doesn't. Because he goes right back to finish up his lesson on adultery. He goes right back to finish up his lesson on adultery in verse number 20. And now he goes back to his normal procedure where he has his introduction and his encouragement. And he says, listen, I want you to forsake not the law of your father and your mother. I want you to bind them on your heart, tie them around your neck. And when you go, it's going to lead you. Do you see? It's the same encouragement all the time. And he says in verse 24, why is he giving him this? Why is he giving him this wisdom? To keep you from the evil woman. All of a sudden, in this lesson, he's right back to adultery again. He's right back to the mistress. Why is that? From the flattery of the tongue of the strange woman. Don't lust after her beauty in your heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. Why? Because by the means of a whorish woman, a man will be brought to a piece of bread. She's going to take you for all you're worth. And the adulteress will hunt for your precious life. Can a man take a fire into his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Can one go upon hot coals and his feet not be burned? So he that goeth to his neighbor's wife and toucheth her, he will not be innocent. He says, men do not despise a thief if he's hungry. We understand that. We don't condone it, but we understand that. But an adulterer, he says, they will never be innocent. The husband will never understand, he says. No matter how many gifts you give, you cannot restore. Now, the interpretation of this passage is not difficult. It's not difficult. He begins with the normal encouragement to listen. He says, stay away from the strange woman. She will bring you to poverty. That's what it means, a piece of bread. And notice the connection that both laziness and adultery lead to poverty. Finally, he says you cannot avoid the consequences. He says you will get burned if you do this. If you engage in adultery, you will get burned. can't take hot coals, or you can't take fire into your bosom and not burn your clothes. You can't walk on hot coals and not burn your feet. You will get burned. Notice he makes the comparison between even a thief and an adulterer. You know how he compares those two. The thief, he says, we understand he's hungry. He says when he gets caught, he restores sevenfold and he gives all the substance of his house. He still comes to poverty. It costs him everything. But the adulterer, on the other hand, destroys his soul. He brings dishonor, and his reproach will never be wiped away, he says. The adulterer loses everything as well, but he, unlike the thief, can never restore what he has taken, no matter how much he pays. Now, my real question, okay, we've talked a lot about adultery in chapter 5. My real question here is, why does he connect these subjects together? What's the connection between this? He's talking all about adultery and drink water out of your own well all through chapter 5. And then he's like, and if you strike hands with a stranger to be surety for your friend, you need to work hard and work to get yourself out of this. And you can work to avoid this altogether. And beware of that wicked man, right? And listen to what I'm saying, because that will preserve you from this strange woman. And you're like, how do these two things fit together? Now, don't get me wrong, it's good wisdom on its own to say, hey, don't mess around with adultery. That's good wisdom on its own, because it'll cost you everything, so be wise and don't do it. But why does he connect all this together, chapter 5 and chapter 6? Listen to me, the connection is hard work. That's what connects these two things, these two ideas together. See, long-term wisdom always requires hard work. Do you want to know the reason why a wicked man steals from other people? Because he's lazy. He's lazy. He doesn't want to do the work to pay for it himself. The reason why a man sleeps with another man's wife is because marriage is what? It's hard work. Marriage is hard work. You see, both the thief and the adulterer, they both want that immediate gratification without any of the responsibilities. Thieves and adulterers are lazy. They don't want to work for money, so they take what belongs to someone else. The adulterer, they don't want to work for love, so what do? They take what belongs to someone else. This is why they do it. Because it is easy, because it is immediate, and it comes with no responsibility. You see, this is short-term thinking, and it's foolish. The thief and the adulterer are both crooks who steal. You see how he equates them. People say, have you ever heard some people say this when it comes to work? You may have heard this statement before. They say, don't work harder, work smarter, right? Do you know why people say that? Because no one likes to work hard. That's why people say that. No one likes to work hard. We're always looking for a way around it. Hard work is actually part of the curse that came upon us in the fall, is hard work. And we hate it. Now, to be fair, there is some truth to this whole work smarter concept. There's some truth to that when they say, hey, you should work smart. But as opposed to what? Working dumb? Well, in that case, yeah, I say work smart. But when you find the smart way to do it, if you don't work it hard, it will fail. Even when you find the smart way to do it. The truth is you should really do both. You see, this is the curse that came on us in the garden. What did he tell Adam? He says, only by the sweat of your brow that the ground will yield its fruit. That was part of the curse. See, before the curse, work was fun, enjoyable. And it still can be enjoyable to this day. But it always comes with a bit of a hardship. God tells us from the garden all the way to where you are sitting right now. He says there is only one way that you are going to get crops out of the dirt. And that is sweat. It's the only way you're going to get it out of there is with sweat. Just like there is only one way that you can get yourself out of debt, there's only one way that you can provide for your future, there's only one way that you can have a happy marriage: hard work. So what is the point of what he's saying? The point is that you have responsibilities. You have them, right? You have them. And almost every one of them is connected to your marriage or your money. Solomon is talking about real life here. You have responsibilities. Almost all of them are connected either to your marriage and by extension your family, or is connected to money, by extension your job. That is why Solomon places the lesson of hard work right in the middle of this context. What we need to do is we must take responsibility for our life. That's what he's teaching us to do here. That's what he's trying to get his son to do, to grow up and to take responsibility for his life, for his actions. He's telling his son, don't be a mark all of your life. Don't be naive. Don't be lazy. Don't be wicked. He says to his son, I want you to work hard on your money, and I want you to work hard on your marriage. Now you can avoid so much misery in your life if you just do those two things. If you just do those two things. But here's the problem, okay? Here's where we go wrong. When we get lazy, what do? And like I said, I grew up in the 80s. So we are the masters of this, because what we do is we start getting lazy, and we are the best at learning how to escape. That's what we want to do. Why do you think you sit in front of the television till 2 a.m? Why do you think that you binge watch Netflix? Why do you do that? It's escapism. What are you trying to escape? Well, it's the stress of life. No, it's not. What you're trying to escape is responsibilities. You have responsibilities, and you know that as soon as you go to bed, it's going to be morning like that, and you're going to have to face them all over again. Okay? Well, I'm going to watch one more episode because I don't want to go to sleep, because if I go to sleep, then it's tomorrow. We want to escape. But the moment that we start doing that, the moment that we become lazy and start escaping and start avoiding our responsibilities, we become an easy mark for this world. And they can lure us away because, man, they are the masters at easy money. They are the masters at easy sex. They are the masters at easy escapes. They're the masters of it. And if you're all the time looking for a way around your responsibilities, they're like, hey, we've got it. It's a one-stop shop right over here. Everything you want, we've got it. If you want to escape, then we can hook you up. Hard work is the answer to so many problems that we face today. Do you feel depressed? A good, hard day's work will usually clear that up. Hard work does that. Do it like a hard day's work in the garden. I'm not suggesting you go to the gym. Who cares if you go to the gym? I'm saying if you work really hard at work though, till you sweat a little bit, do a lot of hard work in the garden, hard work in the house, a lot of those things that depress us will drift away. What about, are you in debt? Hard work is the answer. Is your marriage a little dry? Hard work is the answer. Put some hard work into it. What about your kids? Are they a little aimless? You want to know what they need? I'll give you one guess. Hard work. You take your son and you just work him till he just doesn't even like you anymore. But you know what will happen? You take your son or your daughter and you just work them until they sweat. Something very strange happens to them. Your son, he starts to feel like a man after a lot of hard work. Your daughter, she starts to feel like a woman. Starts to feel like a grown lady, like she's taking responsibility for something. And all of a sudden, they don't seem quite so aimless. Do you feel unhealthy? Again, hard work Is your spiritual life a little dry? You want to know why? Because you have been avoiding the work of the ministry. Hard work is the answer to so many of the things that we suffer from every single day. Of course, there is a kind of sinfulness that is about power and glory, and we understand that. But day in and day out, much of the mess that we fall into, just like this son in the beginning of the chapter, much of the mess that we fall into is down to just plain laziness. We get into trouble because we're trying to escape and avoid our responsibilities. So tomorrow, when you wake up, here is what I want you to remember. Now forget that, strike that. I'm talking about tonight when you go home, when you're in the middle of making that decision, whether or not you're going to go to bed or you're going to watch too much television. When you're in that place, this is what I want you to remember. I want you to think of this. I want you to think, I don't want to be a mark for this world. I want you to think to yourself, I don't want my responsibilities to rob me of what I have. I am going to stop avoiding it, and I'm going to do the work, whatever it is. Only you would know what it is. But I'm going to stop avoiding it, and I'm going to do the work. I'm going to take responsibility before my responsibilities take me. That's what I want you to say to yourself tonight before you go to bed. I am going to take responsibility before my responsibilities take me.